liberal tradition started with the formation of liberal democratic states in Western Europe. Two contrasting perspectives have been dominant in international relations theory, that of liberalism and realism. Whereas liberalism is based on ideas of human cooperation and progress and rationality, realism is based on a very negative view of human nature, that human nature is by nature it is very selfish and conflict prone. So men would never be able, left to themselves, avoid warfare or conflict among themselves. But liberals refuse to believe this. They believe that it is possible to live peacefully if we create a society based on cooperation, and it would enable us to achieve greater progress of society as well as ultimately of humankind. The main inspiration of liberal democratic idea came from a 17th century British philosopher John Locke, who held that nature of human society is peaceful, and through cooperation we can achieve greater harmony in society and greater economic progress if we guarantee a rule of law and create a civil society where it would be possible to guarantee basic human rights like right to life, liberty, and that of property. This idea of a peaceful democratic state achieving greater progress, sort of a constitutional entity where there is rule of law, is based upon certain rational assumptions about human nature, that man by nature is peace-loving and man by nature is a social animal, and therefore if we proceed along these lines, we can even achieve greater peace, prosperity at the international plane. Another important exponent of this liberal idea is Norman Angell. Norman Angell spoke that under modern conditions of economic progress, aided and abetted by technological developments, scientific revolution, human society has achieved such a level of progress, and they have established relations among the different nations themselves so deeply that it would be very costly an affair to engage in mutual warfare. Angell, of course, was speaking against the background of the First World War. He spoke that to speak of warfare is, or to dream of settling international questions through warfare is nothing but a great illusion. So it was the First World War which led these thinkers like President Woodrow Wilson of the United States of America, who was himself a professor of political science, and other people who helped the formation of the first international organization after the First World War was over. To avoid the disaster of annihilation through mutual warfare, we must build a better international order through creation of an international organization based on principles of cooperation and coexistence. In fact, in 1917, just 2 years before the first international organization was formed. President Wilson, in a lecture, while proposing that there should not be any difference between private ethics and ethics pursued by state policies, declared to the American Congress, which is the American legislature, that he could discern the beginning of an age in which it will be insisted that the same standards of conduct and of responsibility for wrong shall be observed among nations and their governments that are observed among individual citizens of civilized states. The first international organization of independent states, sovereign states, was established in 1919, known as the League of Nations, to avoid forever, if possible, this disastrous mutual warfare which cost heavily in terms of human lives and economic wealth in the First World War. Now, what followed was quite disappointing. The League actually was a failure. The failure because the League could not become a universal organization. Russia, Germany, Japan, they did not become members. Germany became member in 1926, but left the League of Nations in 1930. And Japan also left around the same time, because Japan was already launching an invasion of Manchuria, an aggressive war act, which definitely violated the provisions of the League of Nations. Russia joined the League of Nations in 1934, but was expelled in 1940 because Russia had already committed an aggressive intervention in Finland. So the critics, as we can very well imagine, the critics were realists who were pessimists about the possibility of human cooperation, emergence of a peaceful, democratic world in which all states would coexist peacefully. The realists criticized the idealists, the liberals, in very severe language. For example, E.H. Carr criticized the liberals, which was mostly targeted at President Wilson, that they completely misunderstood and misestimated the nature of human international politics. And realists insisted that at international plane, there is every possibility of warfare. It is an anarchical situation. Therefore, liberalism, the voice of liberalism, got somewhat muted in the 1930s. And as we know, thereafter the Second World War happened. And after the Second World War, again we had another international organization, the United Nations Organization. The liberal optimism, however, survived. The liberals still continued that a cumulative progress of human society is possible through peaceful relations. And though there was a Cold War between great superpowers of the United States of America, between United States of America and the former Soviet Union. And despite this Cold War, we find that there was a surge of liberal ideas, liberalism, after the Cold War ended in 1991. And many people came up with new theories about democratization of international politics and the future of democratic world, of which one name is very famous, that of Francis Fukuyama. So far, we can speak of 4 different strands of liberalism. The first type of liberalism is called sociological liberalism. Sociological liberalism holds that today transnational relations are so common and they have interconnected the different nations and their people so deeply that they have become the most important aspect of international political life. Now, this is going to increase exponentially because along with modernization, development of communications will happen, and they have been happening, as a result of which this integration of societies would go on at a faster pace. Now, what does this integration mean? Integration refers to the greater interconnection, interlinking of different states together, and as a result of which a security community emerges, a sense of belonging, a sense of community emerges among these states which get integrated together. The best example would be that of the European Union, of which there are so many European states who are members of this European Union. This becomes a community which offers certain basic guarantees and many opportunities. And as a result of this, the whole canvas of international politics has undergone a change. Now, this is not, of course, accepted by the critics of liberalism. According to another writer, Robert Keohane, these interlinking between different states are happening at such a great pace that what we are witnessing is a relationship of complex interdependence. There are several aspects on which the states are getting interlinked. There may be relationships between different religious groups across the border. There may be relationships between different interest groups. There may be relations between different groups engaged in philanthropic activities, social welfare activities. So overall, these transnational relations and their predominance is an important aspect according to the sociological liberals. Second important theory of liberalism is known as interdependence liberalism. Now, interdependence liberalists hold that because of these transnational relations, states are getting more interdependent. Interdependence means simply mutual dependence. States are developing along the lines of this interdependent development. In fact, Karl Deutsch, who was one of the important exponents of this interdependence liberalism, held that these increasing relationships between different states on the basis of these transnational relations has become the most important feature of international politics. And as I have just said, that this interdependence has reached such a degree that GYAN has said that it is a relationship of complex interdependence. That is, nations specialize their activities along different lines. Though they are interdependent, all the nations do not pursue the same goals, or they may even pursue simultaneously different goals because of this proliferation of these transnational relations. So these diverse fields across the international life, being specialized by certain states, is possible in this interdependent world. It has become so much interdependent that one writer, John Burton, has compared that international politics can be best described in terms of a cobweb model. As we can imagine, a cobweb is a huge network through small wire-like an agglomeration, a constellation of huge interconnections exist within a cobweb. So a complex interdependence is best represented by this cobweb model in modern politics. Compared to that, Burton had said that life, as the realists say, who are pessimists, who hold that anarchy and warfare are constant possibility in international politics. Their international scenario is best represented by a billiards ball model. In a billiards ball model, we can imagine that we hit a ball and that ball hits another ball, which hits another ball, and ultimately one goes to the pocket or may not go to the pocket. So it is just a very good representation of conflict-ridden situation where a state is pitted against another, which is pitted against another. This is the scenario that the realists would always paint, but liberals do not paint in that way. That is the explanation given by the proponents of interdependence liberalism. Then there is third variety, that is institutional variety. Institutional liberalism, its tradition started with Woodrow Wilson. Institutional liberalism started with the formation of the League of Nations and then the United Nations Organization. By institutions, these writers mean organizations like the European Union or the NATO, that is North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Now, as members of these organizations, the states enjoy a certain degree of security, either militarily or in terms of social and economic benefits from the membership of the European Union, for instance. NATO would offer us military security. Then there are another sets of rules which are known as regimes or international regimes. These are rules which are set by a mutually agreed organization like the World Trade Organization. If it is possible to arrive at certain legally binding principle, then it has to be compulsorily abided by every state. But even if it does not, it exercises a restraining influence on the states. This is the nature of international regimes. International regimes control behavior of the states. As we know, Greece was not willing to accept the conditions imposed by the European Union. But it was almost unavoidable because Greece was economically bankrupt. It did not want to accept the conditions, but without accepting these international conditionalities imposed by the European Union, it would not be offering the economic assistance which Greece badly needed. So this shows that there is a shift of loyalties of states towards the international organizations or regimes to which they belong to. Another theory of liberalism is Republican liberalism. Republican liberalists hold that liberal democracies do not fight with each other. They want to live peacefully because the political culture of liberal democracy is peaceful resolution of conflicts. And they project it at the international plane. And this political culture of liberalism at the international plane is getting so much concentrated because, as other liberals have also said, that today military has lost its relevance. Liberal democracies, which are consolidated democracies, have become so integrated that they cannot dream of even fighting with each other because it would be very costly. Now, this Republican liberalism has been criticized by neorealists. The neorealists, a peculiarity of the neorealists is that they have pushed aside all the important aspects from the agenda of international politics, accepting security and ever-present possibility of anarchy. As a consequence of this, as one writer, Stanley Hoffman, has said, they have left aside all the important substantial questions of international politics. Now, these liberal neorealists or the realists, they are so focused that they always raise this important this question of the possibility of anarchy and possibility of conflict. As a result of which, some liberals have gone on the defensive. They are called weak liberals. Robert Keohane is one example who once advocated a theory of state-centric paradigm plus and world politics paradigm, that state-centric relationships are becoming rather less and world politics-centric activities are becoming more important. So this same writer later on switched towards, to some extent defensively, towards realism by attaching more importance to interstate relationships. They are called weak liberals. Compared to that, strong liberals, Michael Doyle, John Barton, Richard Rosecrans, they are known as strong liberals. They say that consolidated democracies, by this they mean the members of the European Union, United States of America, Canada, Japan, etc. These consolidated democracies display the aspects of all the hues of liberalism that we have so far discussed. What is most important is that consider, for example, there was peace in the world between 1945 and 1991. But it was a cold peace. Cold peace because there was a constant threat of a nuclear warfare occurring. It was the period of Cold War between 1947 and 1991 till the collapse of the Soviet Union. Compared to this, the peace among these consolidated democracies known as warm peace. However, by way of conclusion, it may be said that liberals cannot explain sufficiently the lack of progress despite their theory of modernization. Modernization is not something irreversible, or modernization is not something that that is automatic in nature, that would be self-generating. Otherwise, why so many backward countries with so much economic backwardness are there, and why there is so much inequality, so far distribution of economic resources in the world is still there, despite decolonization which had happened by the end of the first decade in the middle of the 20th century.